The time to rethink your sales approach is now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. In fact, some might argue it might have been yesterday. We're at a weird time, are we not, folks? How you doing, by the way? My name's Daryl. I'm with VanillaSoft. A couple of weeks ago, we were sitting back going, what's a good topic we can do? And, that sounds so contrite, right? What's a good topic we can do? But let's just talk between you and I for a second. 2020. Oh my goodness. Has this year been unexpected? You can do disaster planning, disaster recovery all you want. I will challenge. I want to know how many of you did your planning for, okay, team, let's gather around. Everybody come together. Huddle. Let's huddle. Okay. In the case of a global pandemic, do we have our ducks in a row? Are we feeling good about this? Okay. I'm pretty confident the answer is no. I'm pretty confident nobody was prepped for this. And I know some of our governments were not prepped for this. So here we are. So we sat around going full circle. What can we talk about that would be really relevant and timely? And at that moment in time, we were having and hearing conversations about, when do we open up? And maybe we should open up soon. So we knew that in certain parts of the world, opening up would be the next step. And it was really, really interesting because as I've talked to my colleagues, whether that be in social media, whether it be industry analysts, whether it be all the influencers, whether it be our customers here at VanillaSoft, it became readily apparent that this pandemic, this COVID-19 consequence has changed everything. It's changed how people are buying. It's changed how we reach out to people. It changes our activity and how we watch our teams. It changes how the tech stack we use. And here's the thing that we kind of came to really quickly is that, yes, so things are going to open up soon. We're going to kick the can on that and see what happens. And assuming it goes straight, we're going to come back together. But it's not going to be the same at all. Some will choose to continue to work from home. Some will choose to go back to the office. Some will have a mixed environment. That's just the first thing. How you coach, how you reach your customers is going to be different. Everything changes. So we thought we are not going to do a session on how to sell during COVID. That is the most overdone piece of content ever. No. What we're going to do is a session about how do you do it as COVID, kind of fades away, hopefully, and we have to rethink our approach in our new normal. And that's what we came up with. It is now the time to think about your sales approach. So that's the topic. Let's go on to our next slide. If you are here and you're live, thank you for joining us live. And we want you, as a gift for being live, to join us in the conversation. So that means you can ask a question. That means you can give us a commentary. You can give us an anecdote. You can give us a story. You can give us grief. You can argue. You can agree. You can high five, whatever you want to do. My friend, beside the video playback, there's a chat function. If you're seeing the chat function, that's a good thing. Just type in your name. Boom. Any question you want to in there. I want to see it. So let's start it off. Everybody, I want you to go in there right now and tell me what part of the country you're hailing from. Right now, myself, I am in Ottawa, Canada. So check that out. There you go. Of course, if you don't want to do that, use social media at VanillaSoft. Best part, if you're watching this on demand, you can go back to Twitter, check out VanillaSoft at VanillaSoft. You can see all the commentary that took place at that moment in time. So that's what you need to know. Next up, that's the Q&A. This event would not be relevant, would not be possible if I didn't have some really smart people here to do this. So let me show you some of those really smart people. We get two ringers. And I love this. Okay, this is like an all Canada lineup. Hailing from Montreal, we have the incredibly talented sales advisor, mentor, coach, trainer, sales rep extraordinaire. He understands the nuances of language and the style of selling, Denis Champagne. And Denis, he's with Lotus Communications. Denis, my friend, welcome to the show, sir. You look all like polished and happy and professional. Clearly, you're still working from home. Look at that. So this is good. I like the shirt, by the way. The black shirt and the glasses, that's working, man. You're rocking it. Now, any Canadian will tell you that if you're going to have somebody from Montreal, then you got to have somebody from Toronto, because that's just the way they work. It's like the good guys versus the bad guys. I'll let you figure out who is whom. Let me introduce you to the legend himself, been around forever. This cat has more insights and knowledge about sales than I will ever. He will forget that in the morning before, whatever I can remember. That's how smart he is. He's been all over every single transition and every single innovation in sales, and he never fails to bring a strong opinion backed by data and actual case studies. That is Tibor Shanto. Tibor, welcome to the show, my friend. Good to have you here, sir.
How you all
Looks
doing,
like I
eh?
busted him. You were looking down at your phone, weren't you? You were down
No, I
multitasking,
was
and the screen
looking
came
down.
to you.
Something fell off the wall just as you were introducing me, so I was picking it up. So I was not looking
So
at my phone.
what you need to know is that Tibor was having webcam challenges. He dropped his webcam twice in the setup, and now we flipped to him, and now he's playing with electronics. So Tibor has a touchy problem. That's what I'm getting out of that. But he's still a rock star. All right, let's talk
That's
about
why you
what we're
need
going
to
to talk
keep your
about today.
6 feet
I know. I need to
because of
keep
my
you
touching
engaged. I'm going
problem.
to ask you hard questions so you have to give me answers. Let's go to the next slide on what's going to be covered today. I'm going to ask these two fine gentlemen the following things. I'm going to ask them why, in their opinions, in their experience, in their insights, in their observations, in their conversations with their clients, what they've seen now there. Why do we need to rethink our sales approach now? I want to understand from them how things are going to be different in the big picture. And then we're going to get really specific. What does that mean as it relates to relationships? What does that mean as to objectives and ensuring that we and our teams hit them? And more importantly, what is the new normal, the rethinking of our approach mean in terms of our tactics? So that's what we're going to cover off today. So let me just set the stage one more time here as I go to the next slide. If you're joining us late, the whole question was why rethink your sales approach now? And I contend it's because we're just not going to be the same. If you disagree, go to the chat window, let us know. But I want to open up the conversation now. Tibor, I'm going to throw to you first on this one. The opening question is, well, the slide says things are going to be different. It's not even give us an option. It's not like, do you think things are going to be different? No, they're going to be different. So let me ask you this, my friend. Do you agree with that slide? Are things going to be different? And if so, how so?
So I think the opportunities are definitely going to be different, and how people respond to it should be different, but some won't. Some will go back to trying to recreate some new version of the past that they felt comfortable. So for those people, the difference is going to be the greater pain that they're going to feel. But I think for everybody else, it will be different in different ways. And I think some people use this as an opportunity to get rid of a lot of things that weren't working, but they just didn't have time to clear the system out. Others are realizing that their customers have different demands. Their customers' realities have changed. If you're in commercial real estate, just think of the implication of all these people actually staying home. What happens to the food courts under the towers in these northern cities that we're in? So if you think about the ramifications, the economy is definitely going to change. And I want to emphasize change doesn't mean it's bad. In change, there's opportunity, but you can't bring the same parameters, the same paradigm to it that you did before. But I want to emphasize that you also don't need to throw everything out. So I think it's a great time to reevaluate what's worked and why, and do those whys exist moving forward, in which case we want to keep them. But if they don't, then we need to base what the future brings based on the why our customers choose to deal with us and why they're buying to begin with.
All right, so now I'm going to flip it over to Denis. And I want to hear from you. Do you think things are going to be different? And if you do, why and what? And if you don't, why? So over to you.
Well, I think that the case for change is one of the, factors to want to buy or acquire new services or new ways of operating. The cost of acquisition, the cost of operating, the actual day-to-day and strategic considerations are going to change. You may not keep the same number of players as reps for your team. There's a saying that the root square of a team produces 60 to 70% of your revenue. So maybe they're going to rethink their costs. Being remote or not, it still costs when you keep sales teams on, and they also manage the energy of those salespeople that are probably not producing as well as they should. So there's going to be also some rethinking Do we need so many salespeople? Are we going to keep just the best? Are the salespeople going to think, is it what I want to do? Unless you understand fully who you are, why did you get in sales? A lot of people may start to think, sales is going to be more difficult. They're going to be requiring to be more flexible, adaptable, and they may not feel capable to adapt with the new methods. It's true that you're going to be asked to operate with different tools. Some people may not feel comfortable with audio video. I just spoke to someone who's 70 years old, still in call center business, and I spoke to a very young one this morning actually, and asked him, as I was coming into this recording, where does he see things? And he feels that there may be a combination of bringing in the retired guys back to the workforce would bring more gravitas to a conversation in the SDR space to open up accounts and not hire a 24-year-old to call on the VPs, for instance, and coach them in mentor-mentee kind of situation. So there's a lot of wonderful opportunities to bring. I'm very strong on ageism, so I'd like to touch on that later. But yeah, there's going to be some changes, I think, for the better. And people are going to have to ask themselves some questions. Do I want to stay in sales? It's going, sales is not easy, but it's worth it if you, if you have the spirit for it.
So you're very.
Those changes
Go ahead, Tibor.
Sorry. I was going to say, I think some of those changes that you're speaking about are just sort of extensions of the things that we're doing now and are typical of what we've seen. Clearly I've been around for a couple of years, and I remember what happened after the '87 crash. And I remember what happened after the savings and loans debacle, and then the real estate with Reichman's. And, every 10 years, they seem to bring out this Cecil B. DeMille, Charlton Heston type of thing. And every time people go back to exactly where they were before. Some of the clients that I'm speaking to, they're talking about real change. They're talking about, do I need to keep my sales team, or do I make sales a line item, much like I did with a lot of the things that I outsourced? And I think those are, to me, much more interesting conversations, because if you look at what the core capabilities of some of these companies are, do they really need this dedicated sales team? And I'm sure if you ask the VP of sales, they would say yes. But I wonder if you spoke to the CFO or the board, would they agree based on the numbers? And again, the basic question, do they need to change? If you take the CSO inside data that about 50% of salespeople are not making their quota, why wouldn't you want to change? I would look at this as, manna from heaven as opposed to a disaster.
That was actually one of the questions I wanted to bring up. I'm glad you brought that up, Tibor. I'm viewing this not as something to be feared or to be cautious or to be anxious about. I'm actually viewing this as an opportunity. So context, for those who aren't familiar and never heard this, there's a rule of thumb that says every year you should cull the bottom 10% of your employee workforce, with the premise being that those bottom 10%ers aren't the most efficient, they're not working the hardest, and they could be upgraded. And if you do this year after year after year after year, you're always upgrading your staff and getting more efficient and more productive and more revenue per employee, and life is good. And there's something I think to be said here. This is a chance, this is an excuse, this is a trigger to say, okay, team, we need to look into our team, and you guys have brought up lots of points. I'll recap them shortly. And we need to evaluate where we go from here, where we're making the investments or not. So some of the things that I've heard you guys say is, let's look at the facts. We know the markets have changed, and they have, right? Look at the stock market alone. The markets have changed, all right? We know certain industries are just going to take a long time to recover. Maybe that's hospitality, for example. The cruise ship industry might be an example of taking a long time. Airlines may take a long time. Even hospitality, like trade shows, right? Where there's lots of hospitality and people, will take a long time. Will trade shows ever bounce back? And that's a big part of the whole industry we're in. We use those leads, etc. Tibor made a great point. He said, in that uncertainty, in that change, there is opportunity. And those who have done well and flourished in this crisis we've gone through have flourished often because they pivoted, they adapted, they shifted from this was my focus to now this is my focus, and I'm going to be. And the thing I've seen is actually this has caused many organizations to hyper focus. Instead of trying to be all things to all people, they're just focused on their own specialization and their knitting, and they're seeing the results from that. So that's another shift, how to design your teams to sell. Now that you've seen that, when I hyper focus, man, the ROI is much better. Denis talked about the cost of acquiring customers. That's a valid point. Is it going to cost you more money now because maybe you can't reach them? For example, if they're working from home, I can't really send them a direct mail, can I? Because they're not there to receive it. I can't send them, so now I'm not going to send them physical goods. Maybe I'll send them digital goods, an Amazon gift certificate, as an example. Cost of operating. If they're working from home, then maybe I need a smaller office space, or I've got this big office space that I'm in a 5-year contract on that I have to cover those costs on, even though it's sitting empty. Do I have the right number of reps? And I love, Denny, you brought up two really important things I want to explore a little bit. You brought up the actual reps themselves saying, whoa, is this the career I want? I'm not having fun. I'm not hitting quota. It's gotten really hard, really fast. And the thing about the sales leaders is some of those reps who are saying that could be your all-stars. So even though they're making a lot of money, they could be leaving you. So what are you going to do to change their mind? And you talk about new tools. Video has gotten pervasive. I think people finally understand now they need to look at the lens and not at themselves when they're on a video call. Look at the lens. Eye contact matters, guys. I'm going to throw out my thought on this. I heard the other day, a point was made, I thought it was really kind of interesting. The point made was, because of the economic downturn, because of the uncertainty, and Tibor, you talked about going back from 87 and all the subsequent markets that we shall not go back to because they're still burned in my memories. They said valuations of companies are going to go down and they're never going to return. The heyday of fundraising is never going to return. The valuations companies get that they use to actually fund their growth investment and their spending plan are never going to return. That's gone. They're going to be much more cautious about their business growth, which again affects your role as a sales leader. Of course, my response to that person was that's BS. We have seen over and over and over again that the money people want their money and they're going to go with crazy valuations and give crazy money all in the pursuit of growth. Be damned anything else. This is a lot of things we talked about. So where do we want to go with this? I want to talk about how do I manage my team? Let's go with that. In fact, let's go to the next slide. The next slide is actually about redefining relationships. So I'm going to talk about how do I manage my team, and I want to talk about how do I connect with the audience. So Denny, you brought up the idea about sales reps questioning their careers. How do I convince my top sales reps to stay? How do I manage my team? Has something changed in my approach, or is it just same old, same old?
That's a pretty loaded question. Obviously, it depends what drives them to be in sales. I mean, there are people who have started sales and they fell into the career. Others have made the choice because they thought it would be a profitable venture. The relationship they develop with people. Salespeople are athletes of an organization, so they're the ones on the front line, connecting, developing relationships, and then bringing them into the forefront of a slew of various professionals in the company to serve them and their needs. So it basically you have to, I like what I heard from a very successful LinkedIn person who will remain nameless for this particular purpose. But he says, sit down with every one of them, have lunch with every one of them and ask them, why are you here and why do you want to stay? And take the time, especially if you're reducing your sales team, surely you have an audio video platform now, have a virtual lunch, and spend some time and ask them some real fundamental questions. And that's redefining their own or evaluating. And in the word evaluating, there's a word value. But they're just trying to bring more value to themselves as to why they stay. So what were the reasons for coming into sales may be one thing. The reasons now to stay in light of this new turbulent situation may be different. but it's the dialogue. I always kind of prone a dialogic approach. Sit down, ask some questions, and get to know the person that you've hired and what drives them, what continues to drive them. So it's a conversation.
Tibor, what do you think about what Denise said? Do you agree, disagree? And my question to you as well is, how would you suggest our audience approach their sales team, the relationship with their reps, either one-on-one or as a whole team or as teams, to ensure they're ready for this new normal?
I wouldn't take anything away from what Denise said. I think you do need to have that. I think managers in general, under normal circumstances, don't have that kind of conversation with their reps, and I think that they should. When you asked the question, and I was sort of in two minds when Denise was speaking, because my mind went to the relationship with the customers. What kind of relationships do I want my reps to have with my customers? But even that, I would say, could be very much influenced by what Denise said, because when you're having that conversation as to why they're in sales and so on, and you understand what their self-motivation is, then you can begin to understand how to coach them, and more importantly, how to help them align that with the customer's objectives, and that would make them more effective from a relationship point of view. But in my first impression, in terms of relationship with your clients and so on, as you may know, I'm not a relationship guy. I'm a shy guy by nature, as you can tell, and so on. So I'm not a relationship guy. So I tend to put the relationship in the context that if I deliver real value to the customer, then I'll have a value-based relationship. I may not get invited to their son's bar mitzvah, but I'll have a relationship that I can continue to grow as their business evolves and changes, and as my business evolves and changes. And in that relationship, I think that salespeople have to really, my old expression, some of you may have heard it, is leave the product in the car. And more than ever, I think you need to leave your product in the car, because I think there's a lot of opportunity to just have conversations with where your customers are trying to go, what they perceive to be the barriers, and you can have a really meaningful conversation that will move the process forward without introducing the product. So most relationship guys that I know tend to be very much product driven as well. So if you can leave the product in the car and save the relationship for later on and focus on how you can create some clarity for this customer, then I think the relationship takes on a form that can grow and is not of the sort of romantic version that some people tend to think sales relationships are.
So I'm making notes here. You guys are keeping me busy. I'm typing up 1,000 notes as you're both talking, because I don't want to lose anything here. I'm going to go back to what Denise said. So there's two, as you guys have both hit up on it. There's two aspects. There's the relationship with our reps, our team, and the relationship with our prospects or our customers. On Denise's side, the whole "why are you here" thing. I love that. Taking each rep aside and saying, "Why are you here?" Do you still? I'm assuming you're advocating we have a really heart-to-heart conversation. How did you do during COVID? How was this transition? Do you think you could do this again if it happened 5 years from now or 7 years from now? Do you still like this job? Did you need support from me to do this as you work from home, or to, if you're not, maybe sitting beside your colleagues? How does somebody do that? So I agree with you, they need to do that. I also agree with what Tibor said, that not a lot of people do that. How, as a sales leader, is there advice you can give me on how to actually engage with my team so I physically can get an honest answer out of them, and they'll let their guard down? They won't tell me what they think I want to hear, but they'll actually be vulnerable and transparent, and we'll have a true relationship, a true open, non-judgmental, productive, healthy discussion about what they need to succeed?
Well, as I owned my own company in the call center and I had 15 sales reps, the best relationship, the best discussions I had is when I became honest with myself and I opened up about who I was, and show you transparency and not try to put on fronts that are fallacious or, led to, I guess, induce them into thinking that, we're driven and, all of the kind of vanity metrics that sales leaders sometimes have. Sales manager have it tough because They have to manage themselves and manage different personalities, and there's different kinds of archetypes in sales. But the most truest and the finest times I've had with my teams when I was an owner of a business with sales teams was when I was being honest with them about how I felt. And then they would encourage them to open up. And right now there's an opportunity to create a bias for change. There is no need to acknowledge that change is in the forefront. It is there. Let's now put it on the table and say the real things. I think a true relationship is when you say the real things, and when you are able to feel comfortable to really express yourself and exchange with your sales manager. I think that that's when things start to create more coherence and move forward.
Tibor, you said you're not a relationship guy. I respect that. I am often not a relationship guy as well. So there's the relational side, like Denis and I were just talking about, but I'm gonna come back to you about, shall I call it the more calculated side. Would it be a wise approach, in your opinion, for me to say, let me evaluate the results of my sales team when we were 100% work from home? We couldn't see each other. We had technical issues. We had challenges. And who performed the best? Who needed the least hand-holding? Who was able to take initiative? And do I take those people and say, those are my keepers, everybody else I can upgrade? Do I get that cold and calculating? And if I do, is that the right approach, or is there a different metric, a different analysis I should be using to make that decision?
So calculating doesn't have to be cold. It's just objective, right? It's devoid of subjectivity. So I don't think it's such a bad thing to begin with. But I think, yes, I would go even a step further. So I would definitely take a look at how your people performed, not just from the traditional metrics of, how many deals did they bring in, but how did they maintain their work level, their productivity, and so on. Because it is something that they're going to have to continue to do. And I think Shopify is a neighbor of your guys up in Ottawa, but I forget what the guy's title was, but I saw him at an event and he had a great definition for culture. And he said the culture is what your people do when nobody's looking. So I think for that reason, it's great to see which people adapted well. So it's not a big brother hunt or what have you, but who's adapted, who's ready to go. Who do we need to help transition into other valuable roles within the company? Because it's probably not fair to them to leave them in an environment that they're not likely to thrive and succeed in. But I would go a step further, and I know some people may find this a bit odd, but I would re-interview them because in a sense you have a new reality, a new company, a new sales direction. Things should be relatively new. It doesn't mean from outer space, but they should definitely smell like this year's model. And given that, if you were starting a new venture, if Daryl, you and I tomorrow decided to start a new company with Denis, we would probably interview people. We wouldn't just say, hey, those guys are good, let's go. Even if we knew them, we would want to sort of match them against the new reality, make sure that we're putting them into the right role and so on. So I would go further. I would take the test that you're saying the first time around, because you would do that with any other asset. If you all of a sudden relocated the way your company worked, you would re-examine your copiers, you would re-examine your cloud provider and everything else. So I don't see that salespeople who are an asset and an engine of revenue should have any different treatment.
Okay, so we've hit something that I'm really excited. No, I'm excited about this. You guys have both inspired me here. What I'm hearing you saying, in Tibor, you used the word culture, and that was like, boom, light bulbs went off, because it was like, okay, we built a team, we built a culture for life that was a different time frame. Now we're in this time frame, and now we want to interview them, which is what Denis was talking about, effectively having that one-on-one conversation, understanding what they're about, what do they need, but also saying, okay, what's the culture I need for this new world order? Do they need to be independent? Do I want a culture where they're all in the sales pit together and high-fiving and hitting the gong? Or do I want a culture where they can work independently and just get their, I give them their orders and off they go? That right there, that is gold. That just synopsizes on this slide about relationships, about how we need to do it. I love that. Now, I don't want to beat this to death. I do want to come back one point, and then we'll move on to the next slide, because I know we're falling behind here. Yeah, go ahead, Denis. Okay.
There's an outfit,
Tibor, go ahead.
And then I'll shut up. There's an outfit here in Toronto that basically, when they do hiring of salespeople, they do a week-long simulation. It takes you through basically a sale, and they have to perform it with the company that they're being interviewed by. I think it would be wise for a lot of companies to have that exercise internally. Denis.
Yeah, no, a very good point, Tibor. I'm actually going along very much with what is being said, but I do like this acronym that I started using is competency, commitment, and then finally, and I do this with even some clients of mine, is cultural fit. Is there a match with that which my way of operating or proposing ways of making powerful and effective change in a team or a teams? But yes, your viewpoint on the world and how you operate to serve your clients, that's part of what the cultural fit. And I like this idea, Tibor, of culture is what people are doing when you're not watching, but also culture comes from the top. So, you got to talk to the leaders. And as I have done for the last 15 years as prospect C-suite, I've been able to kind of engage in discussions with them and see where they're coming from. And that kind of trickles down through the organization. I hope that in this new situation, we'll be able to reverse the roles, as you so aptly said, what people are doing when they're not being watched or seen and not or they're at home. You can't see it, but ultimately they're happy. And so, yeah, it's a up down and down up kind of yo-yo situation, so that culture becomes more pervasive. It's not just imposed by the upper echelons of the organization, but that the soldiers, the athletes, are also determining how things will be run a little bit. Yeah.
So we agree on the relationships aspect. We need to build ourselves the team that we want, as if we're starting from scratch. We just got hired, right? What's the team we want for this new world order and this new environment? Forget about what you had before. Treat every single person on that bench as a possible candidate to be on your new team or not. You do the analysis. There's lots of inputs. There's the relational aspects. There's the execution aspects. I really like this. Now, there's one final input. I'm going to bring it back full circle, and then we should go on. Remember what Tibor talked about. He said, what's your relationship with your clients, with your prospects? So that new culture has to also factor in, how do you want the customer experience? What do you want the customer experience to be? If you're transactional, fine, that's your choice. If it's nurturing, fine, that's your choice. If you're going to hold their hand and never let go of them, that's your choice. But you've got to build the team not only to deliver and execute, but also to support that customer experience. So there's inside your four walls and there's outside your four walls. That's huge. All right, I want to go on to the next slide, which is all about achieving those objectives. So this is really about the execution. So if we're going to build this new team, but it's a new world order, what tools and tactics should we prioritize in this new world order, this new normal? And what shall we prioritize less? And I've already heard a couple. Denis talked a little bit about more the use of video. That was an interesting tool or tactic. I've also heard him talk about, should we call it tactic, bringing in the more elder statesmen and women of the craft, because they understand maybe relationships better than the young guns do. I don't know if that's the right, but let me go with you first, Denis. What do you think from a tools or tactics point of view we need to focus on? What's the same? What's changed?
Well, definitely, if you're going to talk to the C-suite, that's what I've been doing, is definitely if you can't help them and generate new revenues or cost cutting or cost maintenance, they don't want to talk to you right now. They're already very nervous. I've heard some people talk about the government helping them, but we don't know how long that will last. We never know what the government will do forever. So they have to rethink some of their strategies. So they're a bit kind of on the edge. So if you're coming to them, make sure that you've thought about things, and to have, like I call, elderly statesmen and women who have been through discussions on the strategic level, know what the insights are, the pervasive issues, the what we call the P&L statement kind of discussion. And what those people want to hear and talk about that matter to them, and the organization and the person themselves and what their risks are. It's all about managing risk. So young people are not really right now kind of tooled because of lack of experience. Not that they can't be taught, but to bring in people who have been through those kinds of gravitas situations and discussions, they can bring to the forefront and really connect with them to bring, because opening is the new closing. Anthony Iannarino talked about it. I've done some presentations and talks about how to properly open and create bias for change. Because if you can't bring something that is really valuable for them for a change and start early with that and discuss, and like Tibor said so well, leave your product in the car. It's all about them. You know, the word selan is to give. That's the word that comes from the Old English. So is to give them the time to open up a discussion. So yeah, that's a little bit where I'm coming from.
So Tibor, let me jump in here. In fact, let me even be more specific, building on what Denis started talking about. So if we agreed that the last slide said we need to kind of build a new culture and build a new team for the new world order and build it from scratch, then what objectives should we have in the process? And then after we understand the high level objectives, then we can talk about, as the next conversation, the next slide, the tactics I use to achieve those objectives. So what should my new objectives be now?
So your new objective should be tied to the customer's objectives and impacts that they're trying to deliver. And the hard part, exciting and fun part about it is that you need to understand what your customer's objectives are. And I think that, again, due to the circumstances of COVID and so on, we're in an excellent time as salespeople to go out and talk to our clients, talk to our prospects. I spent the first 2 weeks of the lockdown from about March 11th on talking to people who bought from me, talking to people who I've prospected for years but have never bought from me but are willing to talk to me. And the basic premise was, look, do we agree there's change? And there is. So, and then I said, I don't know where we're going, and I doubt that you do, where you know where you're going. So let's figure this out together. So I think there's a great opportunity, and that window is going to close as we get closer and closer to opening, to reach out and have that direct discussion with your customers and be honest with them and be open, right? You know, we talk about having relationships, but they're rarely open with their customers and say, you're trying to figure things out. You want to make sure that what I figured out is going to actually serve people like you who are my customers, who actually keep me in business. Let's do this together because you need some help in reaching objective, in figuring out your new objectives as well. And this is something I've successfully done with companies in normal circumstances where they're trying to figure out what the next wave looks like, what objectives they should have in place, both in terms of direction and then tactical approach to that. But I think rather than pretending that we know what their objectives are, with all due deference to Denis, every call a C-suite guy is getting is about saving money or making them revenue. But I'll bet you every Canadian company has some foreign exchange risk. And if you just talked about that, you sound different, and maybe that we get it and that we can now talk about other objectives. So I think there is still a window, and what I've been doing, I would recommend to others, is call your prospect, call people who've never bought from you, who you think have a view on their industry and market in general, and work to figure out those objectives together. Because until your customers share with you what their objectives are, whatever objectives you set, you might have to reset when you leave the building next week.
This is huge.
I
So what I'm
agree.
hearing you do. Go ahead, Denny. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Tibor, completely. And I didn't want to get black and white about it or either or, but it's true that it's a conversation. It's an exploratory conversation to a point that I'd like to bring up that I haven't brought up yet, which will be part of a little bit of my book, is I want to change the word hunter and farmer. I'm tired of hearing those terms. We're not in the agrarian space anymore, and we want to change it to, for me, it's an explorer, discoverer, or a nurturer. So those are the kinds of neologisms that I would like to have people start thinking. So you change your thinking, you change your words, you change your actions. That's how you create effects. So it's a conversation. It's and the tone and the vocal quality, all of those things speak about the various issues that you're going to talk about. So it's more well-rounded now, I think, that needs to.
But why not hunt? Why not
That's your
hunt?
choice. That's your choice.
Okay, but I'm asking why the choice to avoid the obvious description?
Well, no, it's not an obvious description. It's a description that the agrarian society has brought up, and they use it as, think of what you're doing when you're hunting. You're
Yeah.
out to kill.
What am I doing? No. See, this is the problem, is that I'm out hunting revenue, right? That's what I'm after. My prey is revenue. What I deliver to my customers and to my company is success. When I go in for a deal and two other salespeople go in for a deal, and you can ask Anthony because he and I had this discussion years ago, I go home and feed my kids. The other two have hungry babies. So it is about hunting. I'm not hunting prospects. And I understand why people feel odd thinking about that. Probably a relationship thing. But once you get rid of that, hunting revenue is what we do for a living.
Well, it's a semantic hair split. I just decided to change the terms for myself. I'm very much, if you would call it in the old terms, a hunter. I've excelled at hunting for the last 15 years for companies. So I know how to open doors and engage in conversation to get them to the next step. That's what I've done for 15 years. I just don't like the term. It's just a personal taste. And, some people may opt to keep the word. And I like the twist that it's hunting revenue. I never thought of it that way. But it's more than that. For me, it's more than that. That's why it's, for me, a career and not just a task. And when I give a lecture at the MBA classes here in Montreal, I tell them, I said, is it a career or a sale you want to make? There's a difference. And one of them, you'll look at it as a customer. The other one, you'll look at it as a client. Again, deference to terms and semantic hair split issues. But it's just the way I see my world, and it's working for me, and some others may opt for that. Others may say, you know what? I like the way Tibor. We have both different points of views, and it's wonderful for those who are hearing this,
That's the challenge. You see the different points of view? That's what we're doing this webinar right now. We don't know what's right for you. You may be in the Denis camp, you may be in the Tibor camp. And that's why we're having this conversation. That's why we brought opposing points of view. That's why you see Montreal and Toronto here, folks. Different perspectives. Now, with that said, what I really... Are you a Habs fan, Tibor?
I am.
Oh,
I used to live in Montreal, so...
Oh man, you're a Habs fan. And
I was on St. Catharines in '71.
You were wise in your path.
Oh my God! Yeah, there, and you lost your way. There we go. We all know.
For me, I was a Boston fan. My dad was a Boston fan, so
I grew up Detroit. Now I'm Ottawa. Either way, what are you gonna do? We have different points of view here, folks, for this reason. What I liked about this was this, though. So you guys started getting into the tactics, and I want to bring you back to that in a second, but I do want to recap. So if the first part was about building your culture intentionally, reevaluating your team and the resources available to you, the second part was, what are those objectives? Those objectives are twofold. What they didn't talk about, and I will bring up, is what are the company objectives? You need to sit down with your board, with your investors, with your management team, and say, have our objectives changed? If we are in fact going to be more conservative in our growth, then our numbers should be more conservative. Does that mean we're going to have fewer people available to us? We're going to reduce our payroll, maybe reduce our team size because of that, because we actually want to get closer to profitability faster. All right, you need to know those objectives. Those are the things that are affecting you. But I really like what Tibor specifically said about talk to your customers. The point being is this: if our team has changed and we need to build a new team moving forward effectively, it's very likely that what our customers want and need from us now has also changed. So what you know about your customer, you need to kind of throw it away. And you need to call them again and say, it's a new world order. What do you need now? What's important to you now? This used to be important. You used to need this. Does that still apply? Or is number one now number 5 on the list? That is a brilliant insight. So in other words, in this new what's normal, what do I do? Make no assumptions. Love that. So we're building a new team. That's culture. We're talking to our customers to make sure that we understand what they need now. We're talking to our investors and our management team to understand what the business needs for you to hit now in terms of your big nut. Let's bring it back to tactics. You started hitting on that. Our next slide, our last slide, is on tactics. I'll bring it back to the concept of video or anything else, are there different tactics we need to do now, or do we need to reassess? For example, cold calling. Does cold calling still work? I brought up direct mail, multidimensional mailers. Maybe that doesn't work. I don't know. Tibor, I let Danny go first last time. This time I'm going to let you go first. On the tactics front, as we evaluate our new normal, what do I need to consider?
So there's two elements to the question, if I hear it right. There's tactics, which is what I do with what I choose to do. And then there's, do I use the telephone, email, this, that, or what have you. So I'll start that. I think telephone still works. I think the tools continue to work. We should think about how to maybe combine them and bring on some other tools. The tactics as to how I use them will change. I think the phone is going to make a comeback more in an asynchronous way. So it's not always going to be a direct conversation. So voicemail is going to have to become a bit more intelligent, and it's going to have some themes and plots connected to the other touch points in the sequence. So the more that you can weave a story, and to Denise's point, some of the younger people can get over some of that age gap by actually delivering an interesting, insightful story in their approach to customers during prospecting, both on the telephone, email, snail mail, LinkedIn. But I think the tactic of the sequence is going to be the same as it was before. What we say in these messages, are they going to be different? So I think all the tools work. Clearly, video has now enhanced things, whether it's things like Zoom or things like BombBomb or whatever. I think people need to use, I think it's going to be a much more personable world. So I think people need to use video. So I'm trying in my own way to transition, instead of just sending thank you emails, to sending thank you videos and encouraging them to, reply in that way. So I think the tactics will change more. The other is, I think we are going to have to be, and this is one thing that I think salespeople are not going to be comfortable with. I think we're going to have to be much more assertive, because our prospects' attentions is much more scattered, and they're trying to do all the things that we've been talking about so far and probably more. So to get in their face with the right message, and I use that expression specifically, I apologize, Nick, I think you're going to have to be much more assertive and much more willing to take that extra step than previously.
Okay, so he's covered off tools. He's covered off some tactics, the idea of like video and the phone, and he's covered off, shall we say, style a little bit, with being a little more aggressive, a little more assertive. Denis, agree, disagree? What are your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, Tibor has a lot of experience, and his wisdom in these regard are obviously evident. And assertive, I like the word assertive, and I think that if you care enough about a client, you have to tell them the truth. So if you're not in agreement with what they say, and as a matter of fact, you made a video a little while back, Tibor, that I watched about being assertive, and the customer is not always right. I just had a discussion with a client this morning about that, and I told him, I said, I don't want to just be wishy-washy. You didn't hire me to be your yes man. I'm there to help you, and if I see things, I'm going to tell you. And you may not like what the way I say it or whatever, but at the end of the day, you'll have your bank account will be more hefty, and you'll be able to operate with less stress, because you accomplish your objective. So, yeah, you have to be firm, but you have to be fair. And I think we have to know a little bit how we're going to do these things, how we're going to speak to people. If it's more personable, high tech, high touch, from way back when John Nesbitt wrote this in the Megatrends 30 years ago. Do we have to, the more we are in these technologies, definitely we have to be careful how we sometimes approach it. We're not into volumes like in call centers, or a stack of SDRs just dialing and smiling. I got this morning someone who was just there was no personable kind of feel to his call. It was just, I'm just another number. The other thing is, we talk about IQ, EQ, and just recently a book that I was involved in proofing a little bit and read part of it is TQ, the technological quotient, to have more scalable capabilities as an individual. So you're kind of a solopreneur if you're working from home. So you have, intelligence, you understand things, you try to grasp the impact for your clients, you do your research, you have your maturity in a conversation or conversational maturity, and you know how to scale yourself by using various automation tools to reach the largest number and be able to have some personalized content involved. So those are the three components that I think need to be really looked at with the upcoming ones.
So you make some interesting comments there, and you were inspiring me as I was listening to you give your answer. I really like your more TQ. I like the technology quotient. We saw that as we did the whole work from home thing. You can't get a webcam to save your life. You can't get switchers. In other words, people are now getting really into live streaming. They're focused on their production. So they don't want to just use a webcam now. Many of them want to use a DSLR or a camcorder or some kind of high-end input. They want multiple cameras so they can actually switch from this scene to this scene over here. I'm on my computer and I'm on picture in picture and I'm back to you. I want to have a lower third pop up. Like, this is the sales reps are getting into this scene, right? So they're understanding that the consumer is getting a lot of the B2C aspects are coming across. So there's that. The other thing we saw happen, which I don't think is going to go away beyond the video. I totally agree with the video. And by the way, video, not just on video meetings, but video on social media. And I don't mean like making a video and posting it. You can do that. But I mean like recording videos and sending them a video. So maybe you did it before an email using Vidyard. That's going to get more rampant, but now you're going to use it on LinkedIn too, to the video. And phone calls. We talked about phone call. Well, you can do the same thing on LinkedIn. We're going to see more of that where I leave you a voicemail via LinkedIn. So it may not work on a handset, but you're going to see that on social media more rampantly. People love it on social media. They hate it on a handset. Go figure that out. We saw a ton more digital noise. That's why really the TQ thing resonated with me. So I see people's use of digital to prospect going up through the roof. But Denny, you made a really interesting point about personalizing. And Tibor, you talked about relationships as well. I see less templates and more time put into personalizing the outreach so it does not sound so cliche. I think people are just tired of that. So if you have a template model that you rely on and nobody customizes it, that's got to change. And then I also see more emphasis on personal branding. Again, you don't need to be an influencer, but I see people will judge you just even on your LinkedIn profile and your experiences. What comes up when I Google your name. So people are just more self-aware now of their, if you will, their reputation, their credibility, so that when they do reach out, they understand these background checks are being done by prospects and they need to pass that test. So definitely a lot more tactics taking place. And here's the irony, bringing it full circle. You're going to use all of the sales leaders. You're going to use all of these tactics to check out the team you build. Are they on video? Are they on social? Do they understand how to, build their brand? As you build your team to build the culture you want to serve the customers you have in the new world order. That, my friends, is what we have come up with today between Tibor, Denis, and I on. Oh, Tibor's waving his hand. That's it. Full stop. Or you got anything more you want to add to the conversation?
Acknowledging Tibor. That's all. It wasn't like this. It was like this.
Just that. It's a full stop. Done. All right. So let's bring up the slide. I'm saying this from my fine producer, Daniel. Let's give a shout to Daniel. I want to say a big thank you to my guests, Denis and Tibor. You see their email addresses here. So this is what you need to, if you haven't done it already, you should have reached out on LinkedIn to follow Denis and to follow Tibor and to follow me. Do that, please. All of us give great content. You've even heard Denis say there, well, I was watching your content, Tibor. We watch each other's content and learn from each other. So you should be doing the same thing. That's the first off. Second off, if you're watching this on demand, you saw their email addresses. If you're watching it on demand, you can just press pause and back it up and see their email addresses again. Send any of us an email you want to. You have a question about what we said. You want to talk to us more about what we do. Do that. Send us an email or just connect with us on LinkedIn and send us a direct message. There's that. That aside, Denis, is there another way we should reach you? A website, a different social media handle? Any final thoughts from you, my friend?
Lotuscom.com, LOTUSCOMM.com. You can reach me there and look at what I do with my teams. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the preferred place where I engage with wonderful people like Daryl Prail and Tibor Shanto.
I love it. That is Denis Chapin. And Tibor, same question to you. Is there a perfect way to reach you? Is anything you want to plug or promote? Talk to me, my friend.
+1 416 822 7781. And then when you finish looking at Denise and Daryl's profile on LinkedIn, you can also check mine. I do have a project coming up, but we'll wait and talk about it in a couple of weeks. Just to tease.
You have a direct line to Tibor. And if you follow him, you'll be the first to learn about what he's about to announce. So do that. That is fantastic. Folks, my name is Daryl Prale. I'm with VanillaSoft. We are the world's most accomplished, most successful, most amazing sales engagement solution. If you need to engage with your prospects in this new world order as you rethink your sales approach, please check us out. In the meantime, I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. I had fun. If you like this, there's a ton more at vanillasoft.com under the resources tab, lots of ebooks and case studies and webinars. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that you should also be subscribed to the Inside Sales Show, the only podcast for the sales development professional, where you learn the meat and potatoes of how to do your profession bigger and better. I had fun today, folks. I wish you wonderful days. I wish you much success. And I wish you well. Have great health. Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Wow. Do I get